In 1729, Voltaire didn't write a prediction. He wrote a death sentence. All paper money eventually returns to its intrinsic value. Zero. You think the dollar is money? You think your bank account is wealth? You are wrong. What you are holding is a claim check on a system that is mathematically guaranteed to fail. Look at the evidence. The Roman Empire took 300 years to debase their currency into worthless metal. The United States has achieved that same destruction in just 112 years. Since 1913, the dollar has lost 98% of its value. That isn't inflation. That is confiscation. It is a silent tax that steals your labor while you sleep. And here is the terrifying part. They are doing it on purpose. When governments face unpayable debt like the $36 trillion America owes today, they have two choices. One, default and admit bankruptcy. Two, print money and destroy the currency. History shows they always choose option two. They are liquidating the middle class to save the state. To truly grasp the urgency, you must look at the mathematical event horizon we have just crossed. In 2024, for the first time in history, the United States government spent more on interest payments for the national debt than it spent on the entire national defense budget. Read that again. We are spending more to service the past than to defend the future. This is what economists call the debt-death spiral. As interest rates rise, the debt payments rise, forcing the government to print more money just to pay the interest, which causes inflation, which raises interest rates further. It is a feedback loop from hell. There is no political solution to this. There is no tax rate high enough to fix this. The only way out is a total reset of the currency. The math has already decided your future. You are just waiting for the reality to catch up. What follows is not a financial guide. It is a crime scene investigation. We are dissecting the corpses of Rome, Weimar, and Argentina to find the only assets that survived when the paper burned. If you are betting your future on stocks, bonds, or savings accounts, you are standing in a burning building. Most people will stay inside until the roof collapses. They are waiting for a warning that will never come. Bankruptcy happens in two ways. Gradually, then suddenly. The gradually is over. Welcome to the suddenly. To understand why you are in danger, you must first understand the difference between currency and money. Currency is a government claim. Money is a store of value. In a collapse, they separate violently. Let's go to the crime scene. Weimar Germany, 1923. Most history books tell you there was inflation. They don't tell you the speed. In January 1923, a newspaper cost 0.3 marks. By November, less than 1 year later, that same newspaper cost 70 million marks. This wasn't a market correction. It was a mathematical impossibility. The currency didn't just fall, it vaporized. People weren't burning money to make a political statement. They were burning it because, physically, the paper was cheaper than the wood it could buy. The money had less thermal value than a log. Now, pay close attention to who survived. The sophisticated investors, the patriots who bought government war bonds, the middle class who kept savings in the bank, were wiped out. Their wealth was tied to a promise, and the government broke the promise. A lifetime of labor erased in 6 months. But look at the simple people, the farmer who owned land, the mechanic who owned tools, the family that owned a piano. They survived. Why? Because a farm in 1918 was still a farm in 1923. It didn't rely on a government stamp to be valuable. It produced food, it had mass, it had utility. The mark went to zero. The farm stayed constant. You might say, that was 1923 Germany. That can't happen in a modern banking system. That is exactly what the people of Argentina thought in 2001, and this is where the betrayal happens. In 2001, Argentina had a modern, Western-inspired banking system. Middle-class citizens held their savings in US dollars within Argentinian banks. They thought they were safe. They thought the dollar was their shield. They were wrong. When the crisis hit, the government didn't ask for permission. They simply changed the rules. They froze the accounts. Then they forcibly converted those US dollar deposits into pesos at a rigged exchange rate. Overnight, 66% of the purchasing power of every saver in the country vanished. Here's the secret your banker will never tell you. The money in your bank account is not yours. Legally, once you deposit cash, it is no longer your property. It is the bank's property. You are merely an unsecured creditor. You are merely an unsecured creditor. You possess a digital IOU, a claim. In stable times, the bank closes its doors, and an unsecured creditor is always the last to get paid. You might think this is an Argentine problem, not an American one. You would be dangerously mistaken. After the 2008 financial crisis, the rules of the game were quietly rewritten in the United States and Europe. They moved from a system of bailouts to a system of bail-insures. Under the Dodd-Frank Act and international banking regulations, if a bank fails today, they are not required to use taxpayer money to save it. They are legally authorized to confiscate depositor funds, your savings, and convert them into bank equity to keep the bank solvent. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It is black-letter law. In Cyprus, in 2013, this is exactly what happened. Depositors woke up to find 47.5% of their savings exceeding a certain amount had been seized and replaced with worthless bank shares. The mechanism is already built. The trap is already set. They don't need to steal your money. You gave it to them. Now, look at your own portfolio today. Look at your 401k, look at your bonds, look at your savings. What do you actually own? In the United States, 2025, the vast majority of wealth is not wealth, it is counterparty risk. A bond is a claim on future taxation. A stock is a claim on future earnings. A bank balance is the claim on the bank's solvency. These are all paper assets. They rely on a third party, a counterparty, to fulfill a contract. If the system freezes, if the courts are overwhelmed, if the currency resets, the contract is unenforceable. Paper assets burn, but hard assets do not rely on promises. Gold does not have a CEO who can commit fraud. Land does not have a board of directors who can dilute your shares. A rental property does not need a government decree to provide shelter. This is the first principle of survival. Hard assets survive, paper burns. In every collapse, from Rome to Weimar to Argentina, wealth migrated from paper claims to physical reality. The people holding the paper were left holding the bag. The people holding the assets rebuilt the new world. But owning things isn't enough. You can own a mountain of gold and still starve to death if you don't understand the next principle. There is a specific type of asset that saved lives in 1929, while another type destroyed them. Most modern investors are loading up on the wrong one. You need to know the difference between what produces value and what merely speculates on it. Now that you know paper burns, you might think the solution is to buy things. So you buy gold, you buy Bitcoin, you buy a plot of empty land in the desert, and you feel safe. But you are making a second, fatal mistake. You are confusing speculation with production. Wall Street loves to blur this line. They want you to believe that buying a tech stock at 50 times earnings is investing. It is not. It is gambling on human psychology. Let's define the difference with brutal clarity. A speculative asset is something that only has value if you can sell it to someone else for a higher price. This is the greater fool theory. You are praying that a greater fool will come along and pay you more than you paid. Crypto coins, non-dividend stocks, raw land you never visit. These things sit there. They do nothing. They produce nothing. They just wait. A product asset creates value even if the market closes forever. A farm grows corn. A rental property provides shelter. A business produces soap. It generates a yield. It sustains life. Consider the complexity trap of the modern world. We have built a global economy that relies on just-in-time delivery and fragile supply chains. In a currency collapse, these chains shatter. The parts don't arrive, the trucks don't move, the shelves go empty. In that environment, a productive asset that relies on a global supply chain becomes a liability. But a simple productive asset, a water well, a garden, a solar panel system, that set of hand tools becomes priceless. During the siege of Sarajevo in the 1990s, gold watches were traded for a few cans of beef. A functioning lighter was worth more than a stack of cash. The simpler the asset, the more robust it is in a crisis. You want assets that you can control, operate, and defend. If it requires a satellite connection to work, you don't own it. Let's look at the Great Depression. The year is 1929. RCA was the Nvidia of its day, the tech darling. It traded at $114 a share. Everyone owned it. Everyone was rich. Then the music stopped. By 1932, RCA was trading at $2. The speculators who held it jumped out of windows because their wealth was based on price. When the price vanished, they had nothing. Now look at the farmer in Iowa. His net worth on paper also collapsed. The price of his land dropped 50%. But notice the difference. The farm didn't care about the price. The soil still grew corn. The cow still gave milk. The chickens still laid eggs. The farmer didn't need a stock market to eat dinner. He held value, while the speculator held price. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. In a collapse, price disappears. Only value keeps you alive. But modern investors are being tricked by a new illusion. It's called the nominal wealth trap. Look at Venezuela in the 2010s. If you look at their stock market index, it went up 100,000%. You would think these investors became billionaires. In reality, they were starving in the streets. Why? Because while the stocks went up in bolivars, the currency collapsed faster than the stocks could rise. In real terms, in gold or bread terms, they lost 99% of their wealth. And this is the trap you are in right now. The S&P 500 hits all-time highs. Your house price is up. Do you actually own more house? No, the house is the same. The currency you measure it in is shrinking. You are getting drunk on the illusion of numbers while your purchasing power quietly bleeds out. And this brings us to the most controversial asset of our time, Bitcoin. I know many of you view Bitcoin as the ultimate shield, and as a tool for transferring wealth outside the banking system, it has utility. But let's be intellectually honest about what it is. Bitcoin produces nothing. It does not lay eggs. It does not provide shelter. It does not generate energy. It is a ledger entry. If the power grid goes down, which happens in societal collapse, Bitcoin is inaccessible. If the internet is severed, your private key is just a string of numbers you can't eat. In a true crisis, a cow is worth more than a blockchain. A water filter is worth more than a wallet address. This doesn't mean you shouldn't hold it. It means you shouldn't rely on it for survival. The second principle is clear. Own productive assets, not speculative ones. When the system breaks, you want things that work. You want assets that pay you in life, not just in currency. If the market closes for 10 years, will your assets feed you? If the answer is no, you are not an investor, you are a gambler. But let's assume you did everything right. You bought the farm, you own the gold, you have the productive business. There is still one thing that can take it all away from you. It is the weapon banks use to enslave the middle class. And right now, you probably have it in your pocket. It's time to talk about the only thing more dangerous than inflation: debt. There is a lie that financial gurus have been feeding you for a decade. You've heard it 1,000 times. Inflation is good for debtors. The logic seems sound. You borrow $500,000 today, inflation debases the currency, you pay back the loan with cheaper dollars later. In a mild economy, this works. In a collapse, this advice is suicide. Here is the mechanism they don't explain. In a hyperinflationary collapse or a deflationary crash, the cost of living explodes, but your wages do not keep up. Your grocery bill triples, your gas bill quadruples. Every dollar you earn is eaten by survival. You have nothing left to service the debt. And that is when the trap snaps shut. You think your interest rate is locked. Read the fine print. In extreme crises, banks have call clauses. They can demand immediate repayment of the entire principal. If you can't pay, they take the asset. You aren't gaming the system with leverage. You are handing the system a loaded gun pointed at your head. Let's look at the American farmer in the 1920s. These were smart businessmen. Corn prices were high. The land values were rising. So they did what any MBA would advise. They leveraged up. They borrowed good debt to buy more land and better tractors. They were optimizing for growth. Then came 1929. Commodity prices collapsed. Corn fell from 80 cents to 30 cents. The bank didn't care that corn was cheap. The bank demanded dollars. The farmers worked harder than ever, producing more food than ever, but they couldn't generate the cash to cover the note. Between 1930 and 1935, over 750,000 American farms were foreclosed upon. Families who had worked that land for 3 generations were evicted onto the road. Why? Because they owed money. The farmers who were inefficient, the ones who refused to borrow, who used old mules instead of new tractors, they survived. Principle 3, debt destroys you. Leverage works beautifully on the way up. It crushes you instantly on the way down. But I own my home, you say. I have a mortgage, but it's my house. No, it isn't. Let me give you the most uncomfortable definition of a mortgage you will ever hear. If you own a house with a mortgage, you don't own a house. You are a tenant with debt. You are renting the house from the bank, and you are taking all the price risk. In Argentina, 2001, middle-class families held US dollar mortgages. When the peso collapsed, their incomes fell by 66% in real terms. But the debt remained. Suddenly, the monthly payment was larger than their entire salary. Banks foreclosed on thousands of homes. Who kept their houses? Only those who owned them free and clear. In a collapse, zero debt is the only safe position. It is not about credit scores. It is not about optimizing capital. It is about being unkillable. If you have no payments, you can survive on very little income. If you have debt, even a small drop in income is fatal. Look at America in 2025. U.S. household debt is over $17 trillion. Student loans, auto loans, credit cards, mortgages. We are a nation of indentured servants, living in houses we don't own, driving cars we haven't paid for, with degrees that don't produce income. We are walking on a tightrope over a canyon, and the wind is picking up. When the next crisis hits, whether it's a deflationary bust or an inflationary spike, that 17 trillion will be the catalyst for the greatest transfer of property in history, from the indebted middle class to the solvent elite. Do not be on the wrong side of that transfer. Eliminate the debt, pay off the house, own your life, because if you don't own it, they can take it. But here's the terrifying truth. Even if you possess the gold, even if you hold the deed to the farm, even you have zero debt, there is still one way they can strip you of everything. History shows that when a government gets desperate enough, they don't just tax your money, they come for you physically. But there is one asset, and only one, that no soldier, no banker, and no government agent can ever confiscate. It's hidden in the one place they cannot search without killing the host. Let's assume you have done everything right so far. You've bought the gold, you own the land, you have zero debt, you feel invincible. But you have forgotten the one fatal flaw of physical assets. They have a location. Because they exist in the physical world, they can be found. And if they can be found, they can be taken. Land can be seized by decree. Gold can be confiscated by soldiers. Businesses can be nationalized by the stroke of a pen. In a total collapse, your physical wealth makes you a target. But there is one form of wealth that is invisible. It weighs nothing, it takes up no space, and it cannot be stolen without killing you. Principle 4. Skills are the only truly portable wealth. Let's look at the darkest chapters of the 20th century. During the Holocaust, Jewish families who were incredibly wealthy, bankers, merchants, estate owners, the Nazis took their property, their art, and their accounts. The wealthy merchant who knew only how to manage capital often starved, because capital no longer existed. But look at who survived at higher rates. The doctors, the tailors, the engineers, the carpenters. Why? Because the camp commandants needed their skills. A doctor could trade medical expertise for extra rations. A tailor could trade labor for protection. Their wealth was not in a vault. It was in their hands and their brains. It was portable. You see this pattern repeat in 1975, at the fall of Saigon. When the North Vietnamese army rolled in, millions fled. The boat people left with nothing but the clothes on their backs. They couldn't take their houses or their businesses. But when they arrived in America, look at what happened. The refugees, who were skilled mechanics, accountants, pharmacists, rebuilt their lives with terrifying speed. They didn't bring money, they brought the ability to make money. Within one generation, they built empires in California and Texas. Because you can strip a man of his gold, but you cannot strip him of his craft. And if you think this only applies to refugees, look at the superpowers. They value this asset above all else. At the end of World War II, the United States launched a secret mission, Operation Paperclip. The U.S. Army marched into defeated Germany. They found caches of Nazi gold, yes, but the real prize wasn't the metal, it was the mines. They captured Werner von Braun and 1,600 German scientists. They granted them immunity and brought them to America to build NASA. The U.S. government knew the truth. Gold is just a shiny rock. Intellectual capital is the only true national wealth. Now, I want you to look at your own life in 2025. This is the most painful audit you will ever do. Ask yourself, if the internet went down tomorrow, would I be useful? We live in an economy of bullshit jobs. Marketing consultants, EEI coordinators, spreadsheets managers. These roles only exist inside a stable, high-trust digital bubble. If the power grid fails, or the currency collapses, if the answer is no, you are fragile. You are dependent on a complex system to keep you alive. Real wealth is the ability to produce value without a boss, without a computer, and without a bank account. A skill is a currency that never devalues. It works in Rome, it works in Weimar, it works in the Stone Age, it works in the Space Age. It is the foundation of rebuildable wealth. So, here is your directive. Learn something your hands can do, become dangerous, become useful, because when the paper burns, the man who can build a fire is richer than the man with $1 million in the bank. But even the most skilled survivalist has a limit. You have to sleep. You can't watch your back 24 hours a day. You can be the best doctor in the world, but if you are alone, you are vulnerable. To survive the suddenly, you need the one thing that money literally cannot buy. It is the oldest form of insurance in human history, and you have likely ignored it for years. So we have arrived at the final illusion. You have been trained to believe that the system is permanent. You believe that if there is a problem, the police will come. If you are hungry, the supermarket will be open. If you are sick, the hospital will have power. You believe that institutions are the bedrock of civilization. History proves the exact opposite. Institutions are fragile. They are expensive. They require stability to function. When the economy collapses, institutions are the first things to evaporate. And when the state recedes, who fills the vacuum? It isn't the Federal Reserve. It isn't the Army. It is your neighbor. Principle 5, local trust networks outlast all institutions. Look at the Soviet Union in 1991. The superpower collapsed. The ruble became toilet paper. The state-run food distribution system halted. By all logic, millions should have starved, but they didn't. Why? Because of a concept called weight. Glate was a shadow economy of favors. I repair your shoes. You give me meat from the butcher shop where your cousin works. We don't use money. We use. Trust. The official economy was dead, but the human economy was alive and beating. The people who survived the fall of the USSR weren't the ones with the most rubles in the bank. They were the ones with the strongest network of friends. The isolated individual starved. The connected individual feasted. Now, look at the United States. We are the most prosperous nation on earth, but we are also the most socially bankrupt. We are institutionally embedded, but locally isolated. You live in a house, but you don't know the name of the person living 20 feet away from you. You have outsourced your survival to corporations. You trust Walmart to feed you. You trust the police to protect you. This is a catastrophic point of failure. Think back to Hurricane Katrina, or the early days of the pandemic. What happened? 911 was overwhelmed. You got a busy signal. Walmart shelves were stripped bare in 4 hours. In that moment, your money was useless. Your systems failed. You were alone in a house full of expensive gadgets. Totally vulnerable. This isolation is not just lonely. In a collapse, isolation is lethal. The lone wolf survivalist fantasy. The guy sitting in a bunker with 1,000 guns. He's a myth. In reality, the lone wolf dies. The pack survives. Look at Lebanon today. The currency has lost 98% of its value. The banks are closed. The government is a ghost. Life goes on. How? Because Lebanon is built on ancient structures of family, religion, and clan. When the central bank failed, the community bank took over. A brother helps a brother, a neighbor watches the street. The local trust network replaced the state. They possess something the modern American has lost: social capital. So, here's the hard truth you need to accept. When the timeline shifts from gradually to suddenly, the police will not be coming to save you. The supply chain will not be coming to save you. The only safety net you have is the person standing next to you. If you don't know your neighbors, you are already poor. Real poverty in a crisis isn't a lack of money. It is a lack of allies. Build your network now. Stop looking at the Federal Reserve for answers. Look at your community. Because when the lights go out, the only thing that shines is the trust you have built with other human beings. These are the 5 principles that survived Rome, Weimar, and Argentina. Hard assets, productive value, zero debt, portable skills, local trust. They are the unshakable laws of survival. But knowing them is not enough. There is one final thought that separates the survivors from the victims. It is the difference between knowing and acting, and the window for action is closing. The most dangerous enemy you face right now is not the Federal Reserve. It is not the debt clock. It is your own normalcy bias. This is the psychological glitch that makes you believe that because things have been stable yesterday, they will be stable tomorrow. It is the same bias the turkey feels every day. It is fed by the farmer right up until Thanksgiving morning. The turkey thinks the farmer is his friend. The turkey thinks the system is designed to feed him. He doesn't realize he is being fattened for the kill. You have been fed cheap credit, cheap imports, and cheap illusions for 40 years. You think this is normal. It is not normal. It is a historical anomaly, and it is ending. The farmer is sharpening the knife. Let's end this with the verdict. History does not care about your optimism. Mathematics does not care about your politics. The Ponzi scheme of global debt is coming to an end. It might happen in 2026. It might happen in 2030. But the outcome is inevitable. Most people will watch this video, nod their heads, and go back to scrolling social media. They will be the victims of the next cycle. A small minority will look at their portfolios, look at their skills, and look at their relationships, and they will start changing their lives tonight. These 5 principles saved our ancestors in Rome and in Weimar. They will save you in America. Do not wait for a formal announcement of the collapse. By the time it is official, it is too late. Fortune favors the prepared.